Nebraska Territory, July 1874. The church bell rang out like a warning shot across the dry plains, but Geneira VanKleef did not slow her run. Her white wedding dress was torn at the hem, dust streaked up the sides. She held it bunched in her fists as she sprinted down the wooden church steps, her boots pounding the dry packed earth. Behind her, shouts rose, some confused, some angry. But one voice stopped her heart cold. "Geneira! Stop! You know what you're doing is foolish!" Sheriff Randall Hodge. Her almost husband. The man she had been forced to agree to marry not 5 days after her father died. She could still feel the bruises on her arms from their last conversation. This wedding had never been about love, it was about land, legacy, and pride. And she was done being the price of it. Her lungs burned. Her chest ached for more than breath. She had not planned this. Not fully. But the moment she saw the iron glint of the revolver tucked at her cousin's hip at the front pew, she knew today was not the day she would let her child grow up in fear. She rounded the corner behind the feed store, breath hitching, tears threatening. Her fingers went to her stomach without thought. 5 months along. And she would protect this baby with everything she had. She heard boots behind her. "Geneira, do not make me chase you!" Randall called, closer now. She did not turn around. Instead, she grabbed the small pistol she had hidden in the folds of her dress. Her father's old Derringer. She had barely shot it before, but her hands were steady when she spun around and pointed it at the man who had once claimed her. "Do not come any closer." Randall froze. His smile was a warning. "You are not thinking straight." "I am thinking clearer than I have in months," she said, her voice shaking. "This baby will not belong to you. You will not raise it. I am leaving, and you will not follow me. You think anyone will help you?" His voice turned cold. "You are a ruined woman. Pregnant and alone. No man will take you in." She raised the gun higher. "You are not God, Randall. And I am not yours." She backed away slowly, then turned and ran. Geneira did not stop until her legs gave out, somewhere near the edge of the high ridge overlooking the Platte River. Her dress was soaked in sweat, her breath shallow. She sank to her knees and looked up at the sky. The clouds moved slow over the endless grass and sun. She was free for now. But she needed shelter. She needed food. She needed to disappear. And that was how she stumbled onto the Zeller ranch. It sat low in a wide basin, tucked behind cottonwoods and weathered fence lines. The house was humble wooden, 1-story, with a broken porch swing creaking in the breeze. A barn stood a few yards off, and smoke curled from the chimney. Geneira approached like a ghost, one hand cradling her stomach, the other still holding the pistol at her side. She stepped onto the porch, hard hammering, and knocked. The door opened fast. A tall man with dark hair and sunburnt skin stood in the doorway. He wore no hat. His sleeves were rolled up, hands rough. He looked at her like he had seen war. "Do not shoot," Geneira whispered. "I just need somewhere to sit. Just for a moment." He looked her up and down. Her torn dress. Her swollen stomach. The pistol shaking in her hand. Then he stepped aside. She collapsed into a wooden chair just inside the door. The man shut it gently behind her. "You want water?" She nodded. He came back a moment later, handed her a metal cup. His eyes were clear blue, not unkind. He watched her drink, then said, "My name's Merrick Zeller. This is my land. I am not here to stay," she said, setting the cup down. "I just ran. I ran from a wedding. I had to get away." He crouched in front of her, not touching, just watching. "Looks like you got away." Geneira let out a breath she had been holding since the church bells. "I am Geneira VanKleef. And I am sorry I brought trouble to your door." He nodded slowly. "You hungry?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes." He stood, disappeared into the kitchen. She heard pans, the clink of cutlery. She had not eaten all day. Her hands trembled in her lap. When he returned, he set down a plate with eggs and cornbread and a slice of smoked pork. She stared at it, then looked up at him. Why are you helping me? Merrick leaned against the wall across from her. Because someone should. She ate slowly, carefully, each bite making her feel more alive. When she was done, she said, I will leave in the morning. No, Merrick said. You will not. You are pregnant. You are exhausted. You ran from a man with a badge and a temper. You are staying until you can stand without shaking. Geneira wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her. She nodded. That night, she slept in the small room across from Merrick's. He gave her clean blankets, a pitcher of water, and silence. The next morning, she woke to the sound of a horse being saddled. She stepped outside, her borrowed dress fluttering. Merrick was tightening the cinch on a bay mare. I am going into town, he said. You will stay here. There is stew on the stove. She hesitated. You are not afraid I will steal from you? His eyes met hers. Are you planning to? No, then I am not afraid. She watched him ride off, feeling the first thread of something unfamiliar tug at her chest. The days passed steady. Geneira stayed. She helped with chores where she could, washing, sweeping, mending. Merrick worked the ranch, quiet but kind. He never asked for her story again, never pushed for details. But when she cried alone on the porch one evening, he sat beside her and said nothing, just handed her a warm mug of tea. She told him the rest the next night. About the man who forced her engagement. About the baby who did not have a father anymore. About how scared she was to raise a child without a home. Merrick had not blinked. He only said, You are not without a home. And something changed. In the way he lingered when handing her tools. In the way his voice softened when he asked how she slept. In the way his hand brushed hers when passing her a plate. They were not in love. Not yet. But they were walking toward it. And when Geneira stood on the porch late one evening, hands on her growing belly, she felt it. Merrick stepped beside her, his arm brushing hers. You are safe here, he said. I believe you, she said. And she did. Morning light washed across the kitchen table, catching on the rim of a tin cup and the edge of a folded cloth. Geneira sat with her elbows tucked close, peeling a potato with careful strokes. The knife wasn't sharp, but it worked well enough. A basin of water sat to her right, a bowl of rough-cut pieces to her left. Merrick walked in, wiping his hands on a strip of linen. His collar was open, a patch of sunburn high on his neck. He set a leather-bound ledger on the sideboard, then looked at her without speaking. She didn't look up. You keep records. Not much good comes from running a ranch blind, he said, voice quiet. I ledger the cattle, weather, fence breaks. Nothing interesting. She set the peeler aside and pushed her hair out of her eyes. It's a good habit. My father never bothered with that. He said the land told him everything he needed to know. Merrick pulled a chair back and Saturday. And did it? Geneira let out a breath through her nose, not quite a laugh. No. He lost half his herd in the drought after Ma died. Wouldn't listen to anyone about it. Stubbornness doesn't water pastures, Merrick said. She nodded. No. But it can ruin daughters just as quick. He didn't press her. Just leaned back, eyes on the window. I want to earn my place here, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. I can cook, so, mentak. I'm not just taking charity. You're not, he said. You're surviving. That's different. Geneira swallowed. It doesn't feel different. It is, he said. You left something hard. You're building something better. That's not taking. That's choosing. She turned her face away, blinking hard. You make it sound simple. Merrick stood. I didn't say it was easy. Outside, the wind stirred the dry grass. A crow called once, sharp and distant. Later that day, she followed him out to the south fence line. He handed her a work glove and a spool of wire. She didn't ask what to do. She watched the way he looped the wire through the post groove and mirrored him. The gloves were big on her, but she managed. You ever build fence? He asked, pressing a staple into the wood. No, she said. But I've taken plenty apart. I used to sneak out through the back pasture at night. I'd hide my shoes under the hedge and walk barefoot till I reached the creek. What for? To think. To breathe. Sometimes just to scream where no one could hear. He didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched. The creek's good for that. Merrick let her hammer the next staple. Her swing was clumsy, but she hit true on the third try. She didn't look at him when she handed the hammer back. They worked until the sun sank low and the shadows stretched long. On the walk back, she asked him what happened to the rest of his family. He didn't answer right away. My older brother died at Wilson's Creek, he said at last. My ma followed not long after. Pa lit out for Kansas in '67. Never heard back. I'm sorry. He shrugged, not unkindly. I made peace with it. Some folks are meant to scatter. And some stay, she said. They reached the porch. He paused before stepping inside. I stayed. That night, she sat by the fire knitting with stiff fingers. Merrick carved a piece of kindling into a sliver of something she couldn't tell what yet. He didn't explain, and she didn't ask. I had a name picked, she said softly. For the baby. Before I told anyone. He looked up. If it's a girl, she went on, I want to call her Eleonora. After my mother's mother. She was kind. Not loud, not sharp. Just steady. Merrick nodded slowly. And if it's a boy? She hesitated. I don't know yet. He turned the carved piece in his fingers. You'll know when it's time. A log popped in the hearth. She leaned back, hand resting along the curve of her belly. Merrick? Do you ever get tired of the quiet? He didn't answer right away. Then, no. Not when it's honest. She thought about that as she watched the fire settle. Not when it's honest. She turned the words over in her mind, let them settle beside her. When she stood to go to bed, she left the half-finished knitting on the chair. He didn't move from where he sat. I'll see you in the morning, she said. He looked up at her. You will. And in the warmth between those words, something small and certain began to take root. By early August, the fields around the Zeller ranch had gone gold at the tips, the grass brittle enough to whisper underfoot. Grasshoppers leapt in sudden arcs as Geneira passed through the tall stands behind the barn, a basket hooked in the crook of her arm. She walked slower these days, not because she was afraid, but because she finally felt no one was chasing her. She gathered eggs from the coop, brushing a feather from her sleeve when she stepped out into the sun. Merrick was by the corral, mending a cracked stirrup with a practiced calm. His hat shaded his face, but she could see the way his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't look up until she reached him. The gray hen pecked me, she said, setting the basket on the fence rail. She's got a mean streak. They do that when they feel cornered, Merrick said. Same as people. Geneira studied him a moment. Is that your way of asking how I'm feeling? No, he said, glancing down at the leather. Just something I've noticed. She reached into the basket and held out one of the smaller eggs. This one's too soft-shelled. I'll boil it for the dog. There's a dog now? He visits. Sleeps under the porch. I leave scraps. Merrick took the egg and turned it between his fingers. You naming him? I was thinking Elias. He nodded once, as though that settled something. Then he said, I got word from town. Sheriff Hodge's name came up. Her spine stiffened. He's asking around. Merrick continued, voice low. Didn't say your name outright, but it's clear who he's after. Geneira kept her voice even. Did anyone talk much? Not to me. But I'd wager he'll poke at the wrong man before long. She looked out toward the ridge where the cottonwoods bent with the wind. He won't stop until he's sure he can't drag me back. Merrick rested his hand on the fence rail beside hers, not touching, just close. He won't find you here unless someone tells him where to look. She met his eyes. You trust the folks in that town? I trust the ones that matter. And I don't keep company with the rest. She exhaled, slow and steady. I keep thinking I'll wake up and be back in that church. You're not, he said. You're here. They stood there a long while, the wind threading through the dry limbs above the barn. Then Merrick said, There's a woman out past the western draw. Lives alone. Midwife for near 20 years. You should meet her. Geneira didn't speak at first. Then, You think I should plan that far out? I think you ought to have someone who knows what they're doing looking after you. She watched him tighten the stirrup strap, the way his fingers worked with quiet precision. You always speak plain, don't you? Only way I know how. Later that week, they rode out together, Merrick leading the way on his mare and Geneira perched on a wide-backed gelding with a blanket folded double beneath her. She hadn't ridden since spring, hadn't thought to again, but Merrick had been careful, adjusting the saddle, riding slow. The midwife's cabin sat tucked beneath a bluff of limestone, its roof half covered with creeping vines. A line of drying herbs hung beneath the eaves. A woman in a muslin apron opened the door before they dismounted. Name's Solace, she said, wiping her hands on her skirt. You must be who Merrick wrote me about. Geneira blinked. He wrote you? He doesn't waste words, Solace said, stepping back to let them in. But he chooses the right ones. Said I ought to meet a woman with more grit than most men he's known. Inside, the air smelled of sage and smoke. Solace set a kettle on the stove and motioned for Geneira to sit. Merrick stayed outside, tending to the horses. He's not one to hover, Solace said, pouring water into the tin basin. But he doesn't leave things to chance either. That's rare. Geneira ran her hand along the arm of the chair. He says only what he means. Men like that are steadier than they seem, Solace said. They don't make promises easy, but they keep them harder. Geneira looked down at her hands. I've never had anyone keep one for me. Solace washed her hands, dried them on a cloth, and looked at her long. You might now. When they rode home, dusk had begun to settle in lavender bands across the sky. Merrick didn't rush. The horses moved with the tired rhythm of animals that knew the trail. Geneira glanced sideways at him. Thank you, she said. He didn't look at her. You're welcome. You didn't ask if I wanted to go. You just said I should. I figured you'd say yes if you were ready. She smiled faintly. You were right. They reached the ranch just as the first stars appeared. After unsaddling and setting the horses to water, Geneira lingered by the gate. Merrick turned to go, but she stopped him with a quiet word. Why are you doing all this? He looked at her, then past her, toward the house where the windows threw warm light out onto the dirt. Because I can. That's not a reason. It's enough of one, he said. She stepped closer. Is it? Merrick met her eyes. It is for me. She didn't answer. Just nodded once, and walked up the steps. Inside, the kettle hissed over the stove. She poured 2 cups this time. When Merrick stepped in a few moments later, she handed him one without speaking. He took it without hesitation and sat beside her at the hearth. The fire was low, the warmth gentle. Geneira leaned back, her fingers curled around the tin. I don't know what the next season will look like, she said at last. Merrick didn't shift. Then we'll find out together. And in that quiet room, lit only by firelight and the settled hush of evening, she let herself believe him. The first frost came overnight. Geneira stood at the edge of the porch, shawl tight around her shoulders, watching the thin crust of ice clinging to the troughs. The baby had shifted low during the night, and she'd woken with a strange heaviness in her hips, as though the earth had pulled her down a little closer. Merrick stepped out behind her, latching the door with a soft click. He didn't speak, just handed her a tin of warmed oats and a spoon carved from hickory. She took it without looking away from the frost. You sleep? he asked. Not much. She was restless. She? Geneira stirred the oats once, then nodded. I knew last night. Like something got whispered to me. Merrick's eyes flicked toward her stomach, but not long. He leaned against the railing and watched the sky. Pale light was just beginning to break over the far hills, tinting the clouds the faintest copper. I took the wagon down into the north pasture yesterday, he said. 2 of the fence posts are too warped to hold the line. I'll need to cut replacements. I can help with the sawing. You shouldn't. I want to, she said. I need my hands busy. He studied her face for a long moment. All right. They cut the posts behind the woodshed. Geneira braced the pine lengths against the sawhorse while Merrick worked the blade. She kept her jaw clenched against the ache in her back, biting her lip when the baby shifted hard against her ribs. You need to sit, he said, not looking up. I will when I'm done. He didn't argue. Just kept sawing, the rasp of the teeth steady and clean through the cold morning air. When they finished, she sat on the stump near the shed, hands resting on her knees. Merrick stacked the cut posts in a neat pile, then wiped his brow with the sleeve of his shirt. You ever think about what comes after? She asked. After what? After she's here. After winter's gone. After things settle. He sat beside her, elbows on his knees. Some. Not much. I think about it too much, she said. Where she'll sleep. What I'll say when she asks about her father. What kind of woman I have to become. You already are her mother. That doesn't mean I know how to do it. No one does until they do. Geneira looked at him. His face was unreadable, his hands still streaked with sawdust. What about you? She said. You ever think about not being alone forever? His jaw tightened, but not in anger. I used to. Then I stopped. Why? Because the last time I let myself want something, it left the same week. She was quiet a moment. I'm not leaving, she said. He turned toward her, slow. You sure? Yes. They didn't speak again until the wind picked up and the trees began to rattle. That afternoon, Geneira went through the wooden box under the bed and found the last of the muslin lengths she'd brought in her bag. She laid them out on the table, cut careful strips with the shears, and began sewing by the fire. The baby's first shift had to be ready. There was no one else to sew it. Merrick came in late, shoulders dusted with snow from the first flurries. He left his coat by the door and crouched by the fire to warm his hands. When he looked over and saw what she was stitching, he didn't speak. Just watched her hands move. I named her today, Geneira said. He shifted to sit beside her, the floor creaking under his weight. Eleanor's the name, she said. But I want to call her Nell. He nodded once. That suits her. She held the shift up to the light. It was plain. No lace, no trim. Just a soft, clean thing to wrap her daughter in. She folded it gently and set it aside. Merrick leaned back, stretching his legs out. You still carrying that pistol? In the drawer by the stove. You ever use it again? No, she said. But I like knowing it's there. He looked at her, long and quiet. If he comes back, he won't. If he does, Merrick said, he'll go away worse than he came. Geneira reached for his hand, not with fear, but with certainty. He let her take it, his fingers rough and warm against hers. You don't have to protect me, she said. I know. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move. They sat like that until the fire burned low. When she rose, she didn't say goodnight. She simply looked back once before stepping into her room, and he nodded like he understood. And he did. Because something had changed in the stillness between them, quiet as frost, sure as dawn. The wind came hard from the west that night, rattling the shutters until Merrick rose barefoot to wedge the latch with a strip of leather. He listened to its howl for a long moment before returning to the hearth, where Geneira sat beside the cradle they built together, her hands folded in her lap. It'll pass by morning, he said. She nodded, eyes on the small, empty bed. She's moving less tonight. She's getting ready. Geneira didn't speak again until the fire began to collapse into orange coals. Then she said, "When you were a boy, what did you think your life would be?" Merrick sat cross-legged on the floor, arms resting on his knees. "I didn't think that far. I just wanted enough land to feed what I kept. And now?" He tilted his head toward her. "Now I think about what I'll say when she asks where she came from." Geneira turned her face to him, pale light from the coals catching in her eyes. "What will you say? That her mother walked away from something that should have broken her, and built something better instead." He paused. "And that I was lucky enough to be there when she did." She reached for his hand, fingers interlacing with his. "We're not just making a life for her, Merrick." "I know." They sat like that until she leaned her head against his shoulder, and the cradle creaked once in the wind. The labor began 2 mornings later just before dawn. Geneira woke, with a low sound caught in her throat, and gripped the edge of the mattress until the pain passed. Merrick was already up, stoking the stove, and when she came to the doorway, sweat dampening her shift, he didn't panic. "I'll ride for Corliss," he said. She reached for the wall to steady herself. "Wait. Not yet." She said, "The first pains don't mean it's time." He crossed the room and guided her to sit. "You tell me when." By noon, the contractions came sharp and steady. Merrick hitched the wagon, blanketed the bench, and helped her up with slow care. They didn't speak much on the ride. The road was rutted from last week's rain, and each dip made her wince, but she didn't cry out. Not once. Corliss was already outside when they arrived, sleeves rolled, and eyes sharp. She took one look at Geneira and waved them in. "You'll be staying," she said to Merrick. "But out of the way." He didn't argue. The hours stretched, marked by the scrape of boiling water and the soft murmurs of Corliss's voice. Merrick waited just outside the room, seated on a wooden stool that creaked each time he shifted. He could hear Geneira's breathing paced, then ragged, then quiet again. Once, there was silence so complete he stood, hard hammering, but then her voice came through low and hoarse. "Tell him she's nearly here." And then, just before dusk, the cry. It was small at first. Then it gathered strength. Corliss opened the door, wiping her hands on her apron. "You can come in." Geneira was lying back on the cot, hair plastered to her neck, face pale and damp. The baby lay against her chest wrapped in a flannel shawl. Her eyes were open and dark, her mouth working reflexively. Merrick stepped inside, slow. He looked from mother to daughter, then met Geneira's gaze. "You did it," he said. "She did it," Geneira whispered, glancing down. He knelt beside them. The baby gave a soft hiccup. "I want her to know she was born into something good," Geneira said. "Not just safety. Something steady. Something she can count on." "She will," Merrick said. "We'll make sure of it." He reached out a hand, touched the baby's shoulder with the lightest brush of his finger. "She's strong," he said. "She is." That night, Corliss gave them the back room to rest, and Merrick carried Nell while Geneira eased herself into the bed. He laid the baby in the cradle and stood watching her breathe until Geneira reached for him. "Come lie down," she said. "You've been pacing all day." He did. And when she curled against him, sighing into his shoulder, he closed his eyes and let the quiet settle. Winter held the land in brittle silence for weeks after. Snow drifted high against the barn, and the days shortened into quick gray streaks. But inside the Zeller house, warmth grew. Geneira's strength returned slow but steady. She moved carefully at first, swaddling Nell with practiced hands, humming old Dutch lullabies she barely remembered learning. Merrick built a shelf above the hearth for her sewing things. He carved a small toy horse from pine for Nell, smoothing it with beeswax until it shone. One morning as spring crept in, Merrick found her out by the fence holding Nell against her hip, pointing at the sky. "She's watching the birds," Geneira said. "Like she understands." "She might." Geneira smiled, then turned to him. I thought I'd never have this. He stepped beside her, his hand settling at the small of her back. I didn't think I'd want it. You do now? I want everything with you. She looked at him, and there, in the pale morning light, she kissed him. Not with hesitation, but with the kind of certainty that came from surviving things most folks never spoke of. I love you, Merrick Zeller, she said. I think I have for longer than I realized. He didn't speak right away. Just rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, Geneira, he said. You and this girl. You're everything I never had the courage to hope for. They married under the cottonwoods in early May, with Corliss and a few ranch hands as witnesses. Nell wore a bonnet Geneira had sewn from an old linen chemise, and Merrick wore his brother's vest. No one spoke of the past. They built a new room onto the house that summer, with windows that faced the ridge and a rocking chair Merrick made by hand. Geneira planted herbs near the porch and taught Nell the names as she grew. In the evenings they sat together with the girl nestled between them, the world held just tight enough to feel safe. And when the wind came again from the west, loud and restless, they let it pass. Because the doors were strong, the shutters held fast, and inside, love had taken root so deep it would not be shaken.